Happy autistic birthday to me. Happy autistic birthday to me. Happy autistic... Oh, sorry. I didn't see you there. I was just having a bit of a celebration as it's 1 year since I was diagnosed as autistic. But hey, since you're here, why don't you join me? Hi, I'm Phil, a late diagnosed autistic adult, and it's my aim to help advocate for autistic adults, and particularly those who are a bit older and have lived their entire lives without the knowledge of their autism. If that's you, welcome. Or you might be someone who has always been a bit different and you're starting to think that autism might be the reason. I hope by talking about my experiences we can talk through some common but lesser known autistic traits to help demystify the subject of autism in older adults. Well, it has been a year since my official autism diagnosis, so I thought it might be a good point to revisit the last 12 months and have a bit of a think about what I have learned about myself, what's changed, what's the same, how I am now, and what the future holds. Now, if you've been watching these video podcasts for some time, you may remember that late last year I did a similar video talking about how I was 3 months after my diagnosis. What I don't want to do here is rehash that video, as many of the points I talk about there are still relevant and could form the backbone of this video also. What I will try and do instead here is keep this a bit separate and build on what was discussed back then. So to get the full picture, it is worth watching that video as well. So feel free to either watch that now and then come back to keep watching this, or finish watching and then go back and watch that one. So let's dive in and have a bit of a chat about how I am now 12 months after my autistic diagnosis. So first up, what are some areas of my life that have changed due to this new self-awareness? I think one of the key areas that I'm constantly learning is about some of the more subtle aspects of my mental health, and even the way I interpret my mental well-being. Prior to this journey of discovery, I had no knowledge of my alexithymia, that is, my lack of understanding of emotions, or even the ability to describe what I'm feeling. It has been very revealing coming to an awareness that I have always had a deficit in this area without any knowledge that other people experience their internal state differently. A key example here is anxiety. I've experienced a significant amount of anxiety since my diagnosis, and while this might lead to the conclusion that if I had not been diagnosed, I would not have experienced that level of anxiety, thus I would have been better not having been diagnosed, I think that conclusion might be a mistake. I believe the real cause for greater anxiety now is that I, maybe for the first time in my life, am starting to understand what anxiety actually is and be able to label and identify it. I think it's always been there, but has been festering in the background unchecked, with the physical nature of it and subsequent health implications not being recognised. So far better to now understand it and deal with it, rather than have it eat away unchecked. Another key thing I have learned is that my body needs to move, to release internal energy, to dispel overwhelm, and yes, that is stimming. As I mentioned in my 3-month video, I now flap my hands and it just works to release that energy. But I also move in many other ways as well. Now, I have always stimmed in subtle ways without recognising why I do it. At least now I can understand the real benefit of doing this and also be less self-conscious about it. I've also learned through this journey that so many people I know have connections to autism, whether that be through having autistic children or grandchildren, or even through professions such as teaching, where they might be working with autistic children. And discovering friends who I've known for many years who are also neurodivergent. I've even discovered neurodivergent neighbours, and through that mutual understanding strengthened those neighbourly connections. And maybe, as you might expect, as autism is genetic, I've discovered members of my wider family are also autistic and neurodivergent. All these discoveries have been overwhelmingly positive. I think all of these things have led to life being quite different than before. Self-awareness changes everything. I guess I no longer need to blame myself for things that don't go so well. Or at least now I understand that my brain is wired differently, so I will be different to other people, and that's okay. When I got my initial diagnosis, my psychologist emphasised that I can now be kind to myself. But to be honest, it took quite a long time to start to understand what that actually meant, past being a platitude. But maybe after this first year, I might just be able to start that journey also. That may mean lowering my self-expectations. This leads to the fact that the other thing that has changed is I feel noticeably that my capacity for many of the things that I may have taken for granted maybe a decade ago has diminished. The obvious one here is my ability to work. Now, I'm not saying that I've completely lost the capacity to work, but I now know I realise more specifically how my autism plays into this capacity, but not just my autism, but also my age. I'm not saying here that discovering my autism has reduced my capacity. That reduction in capacity would have happened anyway. The difference is I now understand why. Without my diagnosis, I think I would have headed towards a crash, as this reduction in capacity collided with the societal pressure to re-engage in the workforce, and at a rate that for me at least would have been unsustainable. When I think back to early on after my diagnosis, I have to acknowledge that there was a significant amount of grief around that diagnosis. This included a good deal of introspection into my past and so many missed opportunities because I did not understand my autistic nature at the time and why I did things, made decisions, and acted and responded to other people in unexpected ways. And I know I made a comment about this in my 3-month video. I think the main point to note now is that 12 months on, that process of grieving I think has passed, in that it is not something that still has a focus in my mind. I may still think about those losses or missed opportunities, but my relationship with those memories is now a little less negative. So I think the message here for anyone else going through the diagnosis, and particularly the post-diagnosis journey, is the grief can lessen as life moves forward, or at least that has been my experience. Part of this grief may have been around the realisation that I am, in fact, a person with a disability. Autism is clearly disabling in so many ways, but the irony is that the disabling aspects of autism in my life, while having always been present, have become so much more obvious to me now that I understand my autistic nature. The analogy is kind of like a blind person living their life but not understanding that everyone else can see. Maybe they always wondered why other people seemed to be able to move around the world more easily, or even had words to describe what objects looked like, and thinking that the concept of seeing was a metaphor for some abstract way of thinking, only to then discover that others can in fact see, and they are in fact missing that sense. Coming to terms with the fact that being autistic is disabling is kind of like that. It's like having been bumping into things metaphorically my whole life and wondering why others don't. This greater understanding of disability has indeed been eye-opening, and I say that from the perspective of someone who has not only worked in disability-related fields, but also someone who has acquired other disability along my life's journey previously, with both some vision loss after my stroke a decade ago, but also coming to understand my dyslexia prior to that. This autism awakening has added a whole new dimension to that understanding, and indeed empathy for all people with disabilities, and a desire to continue to advocate strongly in that space. I think my general approach is to embrace the label of disability, because in doing so, I think I can both give myself some grace in how I attempt to live my life, but also be an advocate for disability in general, and maybe add my voice where others may not be able to add theirs to advocate for that wider acceptance of disability. I'm yet to fully understand what that may look like though. I think also past this point of embracing my disability, I need to focus back in on embracing my neurodivergence specifically. This may mean things like masking less or making decisions about my existence that take my limits into account. But I think one area that I can improve on in my own life is how I interact with my passions and special interests. For a long time, I think I may have been suppressing these things because it felt like I was being indulgent when I spent time on them, because that meant I was not being productive in ways that the world would perceive as useful. This may even be in the form of internalised ableism, which in effect is me gaslighting my own neurodivergent needs while trying to be normal and meet the expectations that I might perceive that others might have for me. And a further point here is that my perception of what others' expectations might be are probably completely wrong. I guess in thinking about it from this angle, it is clear that this internalised ableism is a one-way ticket to burnout. So going back to the be kind to yourself platitude, I need to stop and actually heed that advice. So what does the future hold now that I'm moving beyond this initial life-changing self-discovery? Well, everything is up in the air. Even the ongoing nature of making these videos is not certain. While I have been extremely privileged to be able to spend the time to share my story with you all, it is something that consumes almost as much time as a full-time job might. To research, write, script edit, record, video edit, upload and manage the channel. While I'm not making any rash decisions at this point, I need to create time in my life for other things, so at the least I may need to cut back here, particularly as there would seem to be very little chance to turn this into an earning opportunity. So over the coming months we will see how this evolves. The other key aspects of my immediate future are that I am continuing to work through my other neurodivergence with my awesome psychologist, starting with a focus on ADHD. So I will keep you posted on how that progresses. So that's probably enough for now in this little 12-month snapshot / birthday party. We will keep on talking as time goes on. So for now, please feel free to chat in the comments if you are on this autistic journey about your experience post-identification or diagnosis, or chat about anything else that might have come up while you are listening to this. And as always, like and subscribe for more autistic life experiences of an older autistic bloke. See you next time. Bye for now.